in February of 2014 with fellow advocates who are here again with me to appeal to members of Congress for help expediting the approval of the first ever safe and effective treatment for this fatal disease. It is disheartening to be back 2.5 years later, 110 days past the PDUFA date for eteplirsen, and still not have a decision. I'm frustrated, I'm scared for my child, and I'm also very grateful to the Rare Disease Congressional Caucus for continuing to focus on the needs of patients like my son. So let me just back up a little and tell you how I ended up here in the first place. My middle son, Charlie, when he was 3 years old, the rare disease lightning bolt hit our family out of the clear blue sky. My husband and I had 2 young boys, and I was pregnant with a 3rd child, a girl this time. We had jobs we loved, and we had just bought our first home, an 1803 farmhouse with a fireplace in the kitchen. I was standing in that kitchen the day in 2004 when the pediatrician called. Duchenne muscular dystrophy, she said. I hadn't heard of it, but I soon learned more than I ever wanted to know about any disease, let alone one that would destroy every muscle in my son's body and likely kill him before he reached 20 years old. As soon as my husband and I learned that there were no available treatments for this fatal disease, we set about to change that. 3 months after he was diagnosed, we formed a nonprofit organization to expedite new treatments. And to date, we've directed more than $37 million into medical research and drug development. We're very encouraged that the landscape is changing. When Charlie was diagnosed in 2004, there were no clinical trials for promising medicines. Today, there are several. The fact that some families have options as to what clinical trial they'll participate in is a major step forward toward access for all patients. Innovation has been a critical component in this progress. The example of Akashi Therapeutics illustrates how innovation can make all the difference in the world to a family with a rare disease. When we started Charlie's Fund, we started out by funding medical research through universities and biotech companies to try to make research that was already underway go faster. Then one night, in a late night internet search, my husband came across an article in a medical journal that described a compound that was tested in mice with muscular dystrophy and showed very promising results. We reached out to the company that owned the rights to develop the drug, but they had no interest in moving it forward. They had already spent $80 million of venture capital funding trying to develop the drug for cancer, and they weren't successful. And although we offered money to conduct more studies in preclinical models for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, they had no infrastructure, no employees left. They had basically closed up shop. So we went to bed every night thinking, how can this be? There's a promising medication, the preclinical evidence looks good, and there's no path forward. We can't let this happen. So we hired a team to conduct due diligence on the molecule. We ended up forming our own company that we spun out of Charlie's Fund, acquired the rights to develop the drug, and is now in a phase 2 clinical study for kids with Duchenne. Since then, Akashi Therapeutics, the company, has acquired 2 additional compounds that did not have a path forward into the clinic. The name of the company represents the innovation that's necessary. Akashi is named after the longest and strongest suspension bridge in the world that was built in Japan after a tragic accident in which 100 children died on a ferry boat in the treacherous waters of the Akashi Strait. This bridge was an innovation like the world had never seen before, spanning these treacherous waters so people could cross them safely. And likewise, Akashi was built to help bridge the notorious valley of death in drug development, where so many promising medicines end up dying. For patients to get access to new drugs, it's really crucial that innovation pervade the entire drug development enterprise. And frighteningly, that is not happening. In the experience of our community, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, the FDA is stuck in the dark ages. What's really insidious is they talk the innovation talk, but do not walk the walk.
They say they understand the urgency of Duchenne, yet as of today, 110 days have passed since the federally mandated deadline to make a decision on the first safe and effective treatment for this disease. They say they're adaptable to innovative clinical trial design, yet they just required a company to conduct a 2-year placebo-controlled study, ignoring more modern, humane ways to gather data on whether or not a drug is safe and effective. In this study that the FDA is requiring, children will have to have ports surgically implanted into their chest to receive weekly infusions. They will have to go under general anesthesia to get a biopsy so a piece of muscle tissue can be extracted from their bodies to be tested as to whether that muscle is actually producing the missing protein, which the drug is designed to do. But 1/3 of those children will be receiving saline injections with 0 chance of getting any clinical benefit for 2 years. I got an email from a parent who was grappling with the decision of whether to enroll in this trial. Of the 3 trials we are considering, Sarepta is our last choice, he wrote. I just don't think I can give my son saline infusions for 2 years. This is a real-life example of how adherence to arcane trial design is preventing access and slowing trial enrollment and cutting off innovation. The FDA says they incorporate the patient experience and expert input as we get closer to treatments for rare diseases that are highly specialized. Yet recently, 37 Duchenne muscular dystrophy experts provided highly specialized input to the FDA on eteplirsen. And 100% of the patients in the clinical trial that has dragged on for more than 5 years spoke about the benefits the drug is providing to them. And that input seems to have fallen on deaf ears. We still don't have a decision. As a parent and as a drug developer, I can tell you that the failure to innovate across the spectrum of the drug development enterprise has real-life consequences. Sarepta, the company developing eteplirsen, cannot grow and invest in new products. They have a drug on their shelf that could help my son Charlie. That's an analog of eteplirsen. Yet that drug has sat on the shelf for years while the company is in regulatory limbo. The hyper-focus on pricing is a distortion of the real issue. According to a recent report, total orphan drug spending represents approximately 1% of total US healthcare spending. So for all the noise around pricing, without innovation throughout the system, patients will never get access to new treatments. It is very scary to see the disincentives that are occurring now because of this stagnation. Akashi Therapeutics was started because existing companies passed on the opportunity to develop a promising new medicine. They were scared off. Sarepta has been in regulatory limbo for 3 years and is unable to push forward with new products. They recently had to lay off 1/3 of their workforce. They're lucky if they survive. So to speed access, we do need to look at pricing, but we need to look at that in context of the larger issue. This virtuous cycle of innovation that speakers have spoken to is in serious danger, and we need to foster innovation across the spectrum so that patients can get access to these new treatments. Thank you.